There's a lot of issues that we experience living in whatever location on this planet that we live on. All of them are pretty much the same. We get taxed by our wonderful governments to pay for things that more often than not we disagree with, but then we get propagandized by those same governments to believe that everything that our taxes pay for are things that we would A, not be able to live without, or B, wouldn't be supplied any other way other than through coercive, basically theft, aka taxation. And it's really unfortunate because you try to, from the voluntarist perspective, you try to explain to people that all of those things that we think won't be supplied by the free market in the event of actually having a free society. We try to explain that no, in fact, those things would be delivered and would be provided in such a society, but they'd be provided in a much better, more efficient way by virtue of there being an actual free market where people compete and different firms compete for the same markets to provide services that are better or more efficient. But you automatically hear people try to contest that. They try to say that, oh no, there would be warlords, there would be massive turf wars, there would be a power vacuum, there would be this, that, and the other thing. And they automatically revert to, because the propaganda is so effective, they automatically revert to the idea that this is the best system there is and we should work within the system, and it's effective, and if we only vote harder and if we email our representatives harder, then we can work within the system to make things better, and that's going to be the optimal solution to what's going on. And it's really unfortunate because that's what keeps perpetuating this absolutely completely evil, demented, satanic system that we live under. It's the one thing that keeps it going is people's beliefs in it. People's beliefs that it's a wrong to refuse to pay taxes, that it's a moral wrong to evade taxes, to resist immoral dictates of the state that are murderous and coercive and immoral, etc. People have a very warped sense of reality. Statism, the cult of statism does such a number on people's cognition that it's really unfortunate. But at the very least, people are starting to recognize just the absolute depravity and the corruption that we live under. But it's a question of whether we're going to come to realize that there really is no end game that's beneficial to humanity at large when it comes to statism. Statism always perpetually and inevitably results in more human suffering than it's set out to originally alleviate. All of the excuses for the implementations and the beginnings of governments is to increase justice, to create an even playing field, and to alleviate human suffering. And if you look at history, the entirety of human history, basically every single time that governments have been created, the end result of them has been way more human suffering than any sort of positive outcomes. And so people, I think, need to ask themselves, like, sure, government's absolutely corrupt, and and there's corporations that lobby for an increase in government regulation, but at least we have roads. Everybody on the Epstein list is still perfectly A-OK, and there's been no prosecutions for anything that's happened with that. But at least we have roads. Government has sent billions, tens of billions of dollars to a proxy war in Eastern Europe, but there's been no prosecutions. But at least we have roads. Nobody's been prosecuted for the things that have happened during the pandemic, during COVID. But at least we have roads. Nothing's been done about the wasteful spending, the billions of dollars in wasteful spending that go on every single year. But at least we have roads that the tiny, tiny minority of the actual taxes that people pay, the 40% on income tax that people pay for roads and infrastructure. But let's just forget about that, right? It's honestly mind-boggling, the excuses that people come up with to keep this system afloat, to keep these things going. We pay billions and billions of dollars to our best friend in the Middle East every single year. Maybe it's in the millions, I forget. But regardless, millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of our own taxes going to somewhere in the Middle East. But at least we have roads. We spend millions and millions of dollars to prop up three-letter agencies that routinely stomp on people's rights. See Ruby Ridge, see Waco, see any given list of atrocities that have been committed by governments in pursuit of enforcing the diktats of psychopaths and bureaucrats in charge. But at least we have roads. There have been 2 gigantic world-scale wars that have happened in the 20th century, but at least we have roads. We have central banks that control all of our currency and inflate it at will to the point of everybody being in poverty, but at least we have roads. We pay millions and millions of dollars to prop up a military that, amongst other things, practices propaganda and mind control techniques on us on a regular basis. But at least we have roads. We pay taxes to a government that routinely looks for ways of confiscating our firearms and turning us into obedient cattle, but at least we have roads. We pay taxes to a government that uses its power to subjugate us in any myriad of different ways on a daily basis, but at least we have roads. Are you starting to see what I'm getting at? Are you starting to see how the excuses for all the beneficial things that taxation pays for aren't nearly enough to justify all of the absolutely demented and evil things that it also does? The ends don't justify the means. Not even close. 2 wrongs don't make a right, and supporting a system that does absolutely completely demented things on a routine basis just because it does other things that you subjectively agree with, that's grounds for having a serious conversation with yourself, thinking about what you actually advocate for, and perhaps changing your position and changing your worldview to something that's actually moral and consistent and something that does actually work regardless of how propagandized you've been to think otherwise. Voluntarism is the only moral ideology that there is in existence, because it's the only one that doesn't rely on the coercive extortion of the individual. It doesn't rely on threatening people with violence in order to steal their resources and pay for things. You think about it in any other context. If some random person were to come up to you and say, you now owe me 30% of your income or else I will throw you in a cage, you would laugh at that person, and rightfully so, and you would scoff at them and you would tell them to go kick rocks. So how is that any different than somebody else who just so happens to have a bunch of people who agree with them and some fancy pieces of paper that say they're allowed to do it? Did they magically get the right to tax you all of a sudden because they have a bunch of people that agree with them? Because they have fancy pieces of paper? Because they perform some kind of ritual in order to get that right? Does that make it okay? You should think about these things. And I think if you think about these things, then you'll inevitably come to the conclusion that, in fact, there is no way to obtain rights that you don't automatically have by virtue of being born. We're all born with the same rights, and we're all going to die with the same rights, and nobody can take away anybody else's rights, and nobody can add extra things, extra rights to somebody else. And that's unfortunately the thing that a lot of people believe still to this day, and that is what allows the absolute demented evils of government to continue, is that very belief. It's the belief in authority. It's the belief that morality can change based on which plot of land you're standing on and which other individuals happen to agree with your method or your idea of extorting others for your own purposes. People need to learn this, and people need to learn it fast, because things are not going in a very good direction in this world. And, it's hard to be hopeful, but you have to be hopeful, and you have to keep telling people just the way that it is. So, thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one.